What's up guys, my name is Josh and welcome to another comparison video. These seem to be very popular and people seem to like them and I like doing them. I think they're a lot of fun. Real quick before we get started, these were sent to me by a patron. Thank you very much, you know who you are. He's chosen to stay anonymous, but if you want to send me something and you want to shout out on the channel, I am more than happy to do so. Check the description if you want to get a hold of me. That being said, no one has paid, asked, or otherwise tried to influence me on anything I say about this headphone. Everything I say and all of my opinions about these headphones are my own. And like usual with these comparison videos, if I say anything in particular about these headphones, like this has more treble, this has more bass, this has more whatever, it's in comparison to the other headphone, not as the headphone itself. That information is in the individual reviews. Links are in the description down below, as well as my recommended items and some of the songs that I use to test. That being said, let's go ahead and jump into this. If you want to skip to any particular part, go ahead and skip here. Let's start off with build. So the build is actually pretty much exactly the same except for color. The headband is the same. I will say I'm not a huge fan of the gloss and the mismatched colors of the 58X, and it does have a little bit of a backing foam and you can't really see the driver like you can on the 6XX, but that's gonna come down to personal preference. I may prefer one over the other and you may prefer the opposite, so I'll leave that decision up to you. I think these do come with a different cable, but I don't think that I got the stock cable with the 58X, so don't quote me on that, but I'm sure somebody will correct me down in the comments if I'm wrong. Now that that's out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into the power requirements, and that's where these really start to differ. So the Jubilee here is definitely more efficient. It's 150 ohms as opposed to the 6XX's 300 ohm requirement. And these both have a very similar sound pressure level. It's gonna be 103 decibels for the Jubilee, and for the 6XX, it's gonna be 104 decibels. With both of these, you could power them off of a phone. They would run okay, they would sound good, but you're only gonna see benefits with going to an amplifier. I do recommend an amplifier, although I will not say it is absolutely required. Now let's jump into the sound. So where do these differ? So basically the way these differ is that the Jubilee has better lower mid-range and bass focus, whereas the 6 is a little bit more clear, has a little bit better clarity, and is more upper range focused. Now let's jump into the treble. So I'd say for treble, the 6, when you hear it, especially when you go from the 58X to this, it becomes clear that things are just, well, they're just more clear. There's more clarity, there's more resolution everywhere in the upper ranges. Everything feels very well separated. Everything feels like it has a vast amount of detail, especially compared to the 58X. Now that being said, I don't necessarily find the 5's highs to be disappointing. Just in comparison, I think the 6 is a bit better. The 5 feels a little bit quelled in comparison, but does have the added benefit of not being as fatiguing on long listening sessions or editing sessions, which may be a huge contributing factor to your decision. Now let's talk about the mid-range. Now, you kind of get a difference in what you prefer. With the lower mid-range, you're going to get better performance on the 5. With upper mid-range, you're going to get better performance on the 6. Although with the 6, that upper mid-range does feel a little bit more clear. It's definitely more edged out, has better resolution, similar to the highs, but it can feel a little bit shouty at times, and occasionally it does feel like people are like yelling at you rather than angelically singing at you. Whereas the 5 never really has that problem, and it pretty much feels very consistent all the way through the bass regions, all the way up to the high regions, and doesn't really have anything offensive or shouty about it. Yes, it is still very focused, especially for vocals, similar to the 6XX, but it doesn't really have that kind of shouty factor that some would consider the 6XX to have. Now with vocals, you start to see a lot of similarities. These sound very, very similar. And honestly, if I heard these like a week apart or a couple days apart and I listened to the same track, it'd be very, very difficult for me to actually distinguish between these two. They're that close and pretty much everywhere in the vocal ranges. Bass is a little bit different, highs are a little bit different. After I did this review, I basically stopped listening to it and I moved on to the next headphone to review, and I received this a few days later. And immediately when I put it on, it was very clear that it wasn't as, well, clear as the 6XX. So there are some fairly obvious differences, and I'm assuming that has more to do with the backing material of not feeling quite as open as the 6XX feels. But when you're talking about vocals, you're actually getting really, really solid performance. Although I will say, if I had to give like a separation between which is better for male, which is better for female, I would say the 5 leans towards male and the 6 leans towards female. Both are very excellent, if not the best for $200 and below for vocals. But if I had to lean one way, I would say that the vocals for the 6XX seem just a little bit better overall. And which is better for which, I'm really splitting hairs. So vocal performance, very similar, and really could go either way, and I don't think you'd be disappointed. Now the bass region. Now this is where things start to get interesting. So right off the bat, I do want to make it very clear that neither of these headphones are particularly bass heavy headphones. Not in comparison, just as the headphone itself. Neither are very bass heavy. I would say that the 5 has slightly more bass, especially slightly more sub bass than the 6XX has. And it is relatively obvious if you're used to the 6 and then you hear the 5 and not go, oh, this has a little bit more bass, but it's not a lot more. I would say that the 5 has a little bit more punchiness to it, a little bit more kind of overall body and I keep using this word and people keep making fun of me, but it has a little bit more girth to the lower end, a little bit more grunt. Whereas the 6, not as much girth and grunt, but it does feel a little bit clearer. It has a little bit more clarity, a little bit more detail to it. Now, last category being imaging and soundstage. I don't really hear much of a difference between these two. I will say that the imaging is not quite as pinpoint accurate on the 5, probably due to the clarity of the upper end on the 6, but both have very similar, very intimate sound signatures, and honestly, if you're just in it for imaging and soundstage, it's a coin toss basically. If you want the absolute best, I would lean towards the 6. And that's kind of going to lead us into the conclusion of this comparison. If you're on a really tight budget and you may not have a lot of money left for an amplifier, I would definitely lean towards the 58X. Although I still recommend getting an amplifier, you could probably skimp on that if you really needed to, or buy a less powerful amplifier than you would really want for the 6. But if you want the better overall headphone, I would definitely lean towards the 6. I felt that it just had a little bit more clarity and pretty much everywhere in the range, a little bit more openness, and overall when you hear it, it just feels I don't know, it just feels a little bit more natural to me. Not a huge amount, just it's got that little bit extra that I look for. And the 6XX has it. The 58Xs are freaking amazing. They're awesome. They're close, if not the best $150 and below headphone that I've tried to date, but I think the 6s take it just a little bit. All right, guys, thank you very much for watching. I hope this helped answer any questions you may have had about the differences between the two, which one you should lean towards. Honestly, they're very similar. But like I said before, if you want overall a little bit more clarity and more upper range focus, go with the 6. If you want lower, a little bit warmer sound, go with the 5. All right, guys, I do new videos every single day, so subscribe if you're not already, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.